Good evening and welcome to the concurrent regular meeting of the City Council and Public Facilities Financing Authority at 6 p.m. on January 16th, 2024. Would you please stand and help me say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have a roll call vote? Roll call.
Councilmember Francois.
Here.
Councilmember Silva.
Here.
Councilmember Wilk.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Darling.
Here.
Mayor Haskew.
Here. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a proclamation, and it is essentially a proclamation pretty much describing the actually dastardly, disgusting thing called human trafficking. And I have in the proclamation really long things to read. I'm going to read a few of them, but this is far more complex than just my saying it. Human trafficking is a form of interpersonal violence in which force, fraud, and coercion is used to control victims for the purpose of commercial, sexual, and labor exploitation that occurs in many industries and affects individuals of all genders and ages. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have watched TV and we've seen stories about human trafficking, so I'm going to jump down to the part about the county. Whereas the County's Alliance to End Abuse convened the Contra Costa Human Trafficking Coalition with the aim of strengthening the county's comprehensive response to human trafficking initiated by the county departments, law enforcement agencies, and numerous community-based organizations. Whereas the Contra Costa Human Trafficking Task Force jointly This actually makes me so angry about bad behavior that I'm having trouble reading it. I'm going to read that again. Whereas the Contra Costa Human Trafficking Task Force, jointly led by Community Violence Solutions and the District Attorney's Office, strives to proactively identify and provide services to survivors, investigate and prosecute all forms of human trafficking, and build capacity within the task force and communities it serves to respond to and prevent human trafficking using a collaborative approach involving more than 35 multidisciplinary partners. Whereas in Contra Costa County between 2019 and 2021, 108 cases of sex and labor trafficking were investigated. 207 suspected victims of human trafficking were identified, and the district attorney filed 42 human trafficking cases through the collaborative efforts of the partners to the Contra Costa Human Trafficking Task Force. Whereas the County of Contra Costa is working to raise awareness of human trafficking with the belief that a more informed public will better understand how their behavior contributes to a patriarchal culture that facilitates and tolerates the systemic abuse of vulnerable populations and will take action to combat and prevent human trafficking. Now, therefore, I, Luella Haskew, Mayor of the City of Walnut Creek, on behalf of the Walnut Creek City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2024 as Human Trafficking Prevention Month in the City of Walnut Creek and urge all residents to actively participate in efforts to both raise awareness and prevent all forms of human trafficking. During this month, let us recognize the survivors of trafficking. Let us commit ourselves to building a future in which no person is denied their inherent human rights of freedom and dignity. Let us make it known that human trafficking has no place in this city, this county, this nation, and the world. And I understand that Alana Matthews is here, an assistant district attorney, to receive this. So I'm going to meet you there.
Okay.
Here you go. You can read all the other parts.
Can we get a picture? Can you take a picture?
Yes, we can get a picture.
Two, three. Great.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure.
Good.
I'd just like to say thank you on behalf of DA Diana Beckton, my boss. She is very thankful, and of course, as you can imagine, she has lots of places to be, not only around the county, but around the country. So I am accepting this proclamation and standing in solidarity, but I also wanted to mention that human trafficking is both a crime and an instance of interpersonal violence in which perpetrators use force, fraud, coercion, or other means to compel a person to provide labor or services or engage in commercial sex acts. A lot of times when we think of human trafficking, it's a term, but we don't understand what it is, and that it not only applies to commercial sex acts, but labor trafficking as well. The last thing I want to say is that this is also a month and an occasion to highlight the survivors of human trafficking who, with their strength, resilience, and expertise, are vital leaders in anti-trafficking, human trafficking efforts. So thank you for the recognition and the solidarity in helping us work to fight that. Thank you.
And please take our thanks back to the district attorney, and thank you for coming here tonight and sharing your messages with us. I appreciate it.
Get a blue ribbon?
Yes,
Proudly wear.
We have our blue ribbon.
and it goes with my outfit.
Doesn't.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is item 2, the consent calendar, and I am letting you know that we have withdrawn item 2Q from the agenda, and we will bring it back at a future date. Do I have, is there any public comment on any of the other items on the calendar? I see none, and therefore, I will bring it back to council. Do I have anybody at council that wants to pull an item, or
I'd like to pull item H, please.
item H? All right.
And I will make a motion to adopt the consent calendar, items A through Q and S, with the amendments that were at the dais for items A, D, E, and F.
Okay, thank you.
But not Q.
Not
That
Q.
was pulled.
I said,
A through, okay.
I meant whatever it was. I thought I grabbed
Whatever
the
we
right
meant to
one.
have, yes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Francois,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilk,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Darling,
Aye.
Mayor Haskell.
Aye. Thank you, that was very efficient. All right, the next item on the agenda is
Is item H.
H. Absolutely correct.
I pulled this because I think this is an important action that we're taking to set aside and allocate some of our unassigned fund balance into the fiscal emergency reserve and also for general fund contingency, but I had a couple questions about those. In terms of a general fund contingency reserve, are we proposing to establish any policies around that in terms of should it be a formula for the future and how we would use those funds, or just to leave them, I guess, essentially the way we have done it with our facilities reserve, which we add to it as is and withdraw from it as needed?
Good evening, Mayor Haskew and council members. Kirsten Lacasse, Administrative Services Director. So what we are proposing would be to have a general fund contingency, which would have more flexibility versus a catastrophic emergency or a fiscal emergency. What we will be doing is bringing forward a revised reserve policy which will also include this reserve. And what we are going to propose likely is that we would put a cap on or an amount on what it should be funded. So a 2 to 5% of general fund expenditures, and then how it is spent would be brought forward to council as items came forward. In general, it would be for things that were unanticipated that would come up throughout the year.
Thank you. My second question has to do with if currently our fiscal many of our reserve accounts are funded at a formulaic level against the operating budget or even the capital budget, I think. Are we proposing if we add and increase the amounts in our fiscal emergency reserve, we will be exceeding the formulaic amount? Will this then be basically winnowed down over time, or are we proposing to increase the amount of the formula?
It could actually be done either way. We were proposing to have it be on top of what that formula would be. However, if we were going forward, needed to have, preferred not to add to that reserve and to winnow away at it, we could, and would likely, this would bring us through 2029. If we were to essentially not fund our reserves, but continue to calculate based on the policy, and then just use this money to help offset that, it would get us through 2029.
So we can discuss that when you bring back the policy updates. And how long before that will happen?
Within the next 3 months, we're anticipating.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Anybody have any additional questions and items? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Move to adopt the resolution that authorizes the allocation of the fiscal year 2023 general fund unassigned fund balance.
Second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
Councilmember Francois.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilk.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Darling.
Aye.
Mayor Haskew.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Next item on our agenda is public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the council cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be allocated at this time for public communications for items not on the agenda. If additional time is required, public comment for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. If you would like to make a public comment, would you please come forward and step to the dais?
Greetings. My name is Pete Bennett. I've been a resident in the area for 45 years. I've had my family murdered. I've shared this before. My girlfriend was the one in the Amber Alert with her beautiful little daughter. The girl that saved my life last year, she died. I have enough people around me deceased that I have a book. I have a book of tragedies, arson, murders, extortion, racketeering, police officers arrested connected to my story. I've been standing in front of this council for 10 years. More than 50 times I've spoken. I finally got a place to live in the homeless shelter, a little tiny room. I don't have any money. All my money's been stolen. I lost $2 million in a court case 30 years ago. I know who did it. Well, I don't know who did the killing, but I know who blocked it. I have lost everything I own, including my sons. All my property's been taken over and over. I got robbed in my storage unit. $2,000 worth of my music gear was stolen again. Do you think maybe somebody could give me an answer? WalnutCreekPolice.com. I'm going to start putting all the death threats I get. I get hundreds of them. I think my life was worth more than nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people who would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to council member and staff announcements, reports of activities and requests. City Attorney.
Hi, Madam Mayor, there was no reportable action from closed session this evening on either item.
Okay. City Manager?
Yeah, good evening, Dan Buckshire, City Manager. I do have two updates this evening. The first is related to the East Bay Economic Development Association, known as East Bay EDA. Walnut Creek is a member. It's comprised of hundreds of organizations in both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. I serve on the executive board as an appointee from the Public Managers Association for Contra Costa. It's about a 30-member board. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention, last week there was a panel that was hosted at the meeting on retail theft, primarily on organized retail theft. The Alameda District Attorney Pamela Price was present. Probation Chief of Alameda was present. Our Contra Costa District Attorney Dinah Becton was present. A few Oakland PD officer, police management were there, and our Chief Jamie Knox served on this panel. And the reason I bring this to your attention, obviously, is a good update and discussion on the different dynamics, but to highlight how significant organized retail theft has become not only throughout the Bay Area but California. It is not unique to Walnut Creek. It is pervasive throughout. And what I find interesting from a public policy perspective, the East Bay EDA board is contemplating making public safety and retail theft its #1 priority, as it's the #1 impact on the economic prosperity of the region from its perspective. They haven't decided that yet, but that's the discussion at this point in time. I've served on this board now for about 4 or 5 years, and this is by far the most substantive issue in terms of safety. Nothing along these lines has come up previously. So I wanted to acknowledge our chief and thank him for serving on that board. He did a great job. The update was well received, and just also to highlight that in many avenues, retail theft is coming up. Walnut Creek is trying to press the issue as much as possible per your council's direction, per our legislative platform. So that's an update on that front. The other, I wanted to touch base briefly on the governor's state budget proposal that was came about on January 10th. The state budget is proposed at $291 billion, of which $209 billion is the general fund. As you've probably read in the news, there's some lack of agreement between the Independent Legislative Analyst's Office on the size of the budget gap compared to the governor's staff. The Legislative Analyst Department has estimated the budget gap or deficit at $68 billion. The governor's office is estimating at $38 billion, so a $30 billion difference. Now, part of this is basically budgeting parlance in terms of what's in the baseline or what's not. After some adjustments, they're really about $10 billion apart in their difference of opinion. The governor's budget addresses about $58 billion of the $68 billion identified by the Legislative Analyst's Office. The quote that I hope is never used for our budgeting per the LAO is that that differential of about $10 billion is plausible but optimistic. So the governor's budget is much more optimistic in terms of revenue assumptions and what will rebound compared to the Legislative Analyst's Office. So it's about $10 billion of the differential. I guess if you're looking for the good news, direct funding to cities does not appear to be at stake or on the table at this point in time. A lot of the strategy is about deferring some expenditures into future years with the idea that personal income tax, which accounts for about 70% of the revenues of the state budget, will rebound because it is very cyclical. There is about $8 billion of cuts that are legitimate cuts. A lot of the other activities are more deferrals and some other types of shorter-term adjustments. So I just wanted to provide that update. The way the process works is this will continue to be discussed in the legislature. The governor will then come out with the May revised proposed budget, and then the legislature has until June 30th, I believe it is, to adopt the budget to take effect for the new fiscal year. And that's my update, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Quite comprehensive. Matt, would you please be our first?
Thank you, Mayor. My update is brief. I had a nice holiday break, and I'm raring to go in terms of taking up my council activities in January. I have a chamber board meeting on Thursday and a Recycle Smart board meeting next week. So I will give an update at our next council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Wilk.
You're the mayor.
I'm not plugged in today.
Again, a brief update, maybe not quite as brief, but still a brief update. So on County Connection, we approved the reappointment of Ian McLaughlin, who is a Walnut Creek resident, to the advisory committee representing the city of Walnut Creek. So that was approved at our last meeting. We did receive an update from our general manager regarding a proposed bill by Senator Wahab that is to bring all operators under one main entity for the 9 counties. You're probably familiar with this with CCTA. It's under discussion. It's actually been put off now for another year, but it's quite controversial. None of the bodies that are part of these, like County Connection and Tri-Delt and all these other public transit agencies, none of them are for this. So the conversation is involved with MTC and what can be done to alleviate the concern that there are inefficiencies in the fact that there are several different transit agencies that all roll up to BART, essentially. We had a Finance Committee meeting. That's actually what we're going to be talking about in our agenda item coming up. And I had the opportunity to attend the Bedford Gallery for the California Clay exhibit. Huge amount of people came. It was great. Pottery and clay is big, big stuff in California, especially in the Bay Area. So get out there and check out the Bedford Gallery.
Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone. Along with Councilmember Francois, I serve on the board of Recycle Smart, which is our solid waste authority and recycling authority for Walnut Creek and some other agencies near us. We are working on an upcoming new franchise agreement with our various vendors, and we have entered into negotiation period. And this means, and this is important for my colleagues to know, this means that anyone representing all of us cannot speak with anyone who represents a potential vendor about the franchise issues. So it extends beyond our board members and staff to include our staff here at this agency. So just be mindful of that because it puts us in, we don't want to step over the lines of the rules that we've established for this. So thank you all. And I also serve on the California Seismic Safety Commission. And last week during our quarterly meeting, we discussed the fact that the California Earthquake Authority is offering one-time grants to homeowners across the state, not all parts of the state, but in certain zip codes, and all of Walnut Creek's zip codes are eligible. It's up to a $3,000 one-time grant to a homeowner to basically improve their seismic resiliency through brace and bolt programs to basically make your foundation more resilient to earthquakes and less likely to have seismic consequences if we have an earthquake. It is, to be qualified, you need to be in the right zip code, which anyone living in Walnut Creek, unincorporated or incorporated is. It needs to be a single family home, so it can't be a condominium or apartment. And the construction needs to be older than 1980. So if you have a newer property, the foundation structure probably meets seismic codes. So I wanted to pass it on. And in order to, the program, you have to submit by mid-February your application or your interest. And you go to earthquakebracebolt.com to get the details. That's earthquakebracebolt.com. And thank you, everyone. I hope some people take us. Maybe I'll do it. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Mayor Pro Tem Darling.
Thank you, and Happy New Year again. I got to represent the city at the mayor's conference because our mayor was enjoying her family, and we heard about the 30 by 30 program. East Bay Regional Parks came and presented And it's a program that we will be taking a look at to see. It's the governor's commitment to increasing the amount of land and conservation within the state of California. And so there's some opportunities there. Councilmember Wilk and I were the Finance Committee. We'll talk about that. And we did the Legislative Committee today, heard about all the happenings in Sacramento and all the fun stuff going on there. Walnut Creek Downtown, their board got together. They talked about wrapping up the ice skating season. They were very appreciative of the money that the city put into the ice skating rink this year. And then they got the same great presentation on the contribution of the arts to the financial picture in Walnut Creek that we got. And they were very appreciative of that, and they really enjoyed getting all that information. The last thing, MCE hasn't met because we didn't have our meeting this month, but we have been working for a while on a tool that should lower the cost of renewable resources, and it's taking advantage of the MCE's ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. We formed a separate California Community Choice Aggregate Financing Authority, and they are issuing bonds which allow us to prepay for energy contracts. It is something that has been happening for fossil fuels forever. It's one of the first times that they've done it for recyclable, renewable, and it's going to save approximately 12% on the prepaid energy for the first 7 years. It's anticipated, it worked out much better than we anticipated. We got a lot more interest, so we got a much better interest rate, and it should save probably enough power to fund 210,000 homes, or to charge 210,000 homes. It's going to help us really help maintain the costs that MCE is charging for electricity. So it was an innovative financial package that people put together. Took me hours to write the formulas out to figure out how it worked. But once I figured it out, I was like, wow, that's really cool. So that was good to see that work.
Thank you. I had a Contra Costa Transportation Authority meeting, and we spent a lot of time talking about the issues with the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and how much additional structure needs to be added if we take out the bike lane and put in an additional lane there. I tried to look interested. It wasn't very interesting to me, although I did learn a lot about how you build bridges and how you keep it going. But I like it better when we talk about us. Speaking of ice skating, usually we don't mention the fun part, but I actually went ice skating 4 times, 15 minutes a shot, did not fall once, and I can attest that those little kids with those with those plastic guiding things are a complete danger to anybody over 30. So we encourage you to come. We had a lot of fun, and it was great to see the kids. And so thank you to Walnut Creek Downtown for putting it on, and we're happy to do that. Okay, now I think that we've covered that item, and the next item is consideration for the Boundary Oak Driving Range Improvement Project Fund, and I see Kevin Safine has stepped forward.
I have. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Kevin Safine, Director of Arts and Recreation. I am talking tonight about the Boundary Oak Driving Range funding options, and I do want to thank the Finance Committee for their work on this, Councilmember Wilk, Mayor Pro Tem Darling, and Treasurer Casano for their work on this. You have in your packets the agenda report. I won't go through all the details. It'll just feel like it. Thank you for laughing. So tonight, the recommended council action, which is recommended by staff and by the Finance Committee, is to adopt a resolution approving funding for the driving range improvement project with an internal loan from the general fund in the amount of $4.721 million, with a term of 15 years and a fixed rate of 2.75%. That's 1. And 2, increasing appropriations in your capital budget by $721,000 for the total of $4.721 million. So I'll come back to that recommendation at the end of the presentation. So background on the golf course and the property. This is a city asset, city-owned asset. I'm going to talk about an enterprise fund, but this is owned by the community. Opened 55 years ago, 1969, a beautiful 18-hole championship course, many practice areas, putting, chipping, a large 30,000 square foot clubhouse containing pro shop, cart barn, grill downstairs, the tap house, and then upstairs event spaces. And then there's the driving range. So the pictures that I'm going to show you here are beautiful and stunning and reflect the work of Corsco. Corsco is our partner in this. I'll talk about them in a second. They also maintain the driving range, so I don't want the pictures that I'm showing with the driving range to reflect the work that Corsco does. But here we go. This is what the driving range looks like from above the top of the range, looking down toward Ignacio Valley. So I'm going to talk a bit in a minute about the amenities or lack thereof of the range, but you'll see pictures that I don't usually show when I'm promoting our programs, but this is to paint an image of what we're facing at the course. So background about, again, that's an image of the driving range. A background about the golf course, it is an enterprise fund, which means that we are self-sustaining and funds generated by the course stay with the course, whether it's for operations, for capital, or for reserves. There is no regular general fund support for the golf course, and there is no Measure O fund support going to the golf course. We are healthy. There's a history of investing in the course to support the investments, improving the course conditions, the cart paths, the irrigation system, the clubhouse, the tap house. And all debt service has been paid consistently. That's because of decisions that were made by this council, prior councils, and prior staff, including my predecessor, who's here in the audience as well. So I want to thank him, Barry Gordon, for his work and his vision for this project. More about the operation. Corsco Incorporated operates Boundary Oak. It's called a management contractor agreement that we have in place since 2009. We renewed it 5 years later in 2014, and then again, we're good with Corsco, who is a fabulous partner to us, through 2032. And there are three standards, three pillars that we're looking at to define our success. The first is customer experience, which is expected to be excellent, and it is. It's a well-maintained property, and the enterprise fund itself is strong. That's true of the entire course, with the exception of the range. And so the headline is that the range is not meeting those three success pillars: customer service, well-maintained, despite our best efforts, and return on the investment there. So that's our opportunity here. So a bit about the driving range and the why we're here. Without going into all the details, the irrigation system is no longer functional. The landscaping, as you saw from the first image, is eroding. There are negative environmental impacts as a result of that. Requires Corsco to continue to invest and fix the things that aren't right there. One of the worst examples, or perhaps best examples of the condition, is to show those images there on the right. When it rains, we have to close the course. Why? Because as you see, the balls get plugged in the mud, and our machinery that would normally be able to pick up balls, or the pickup balls in other courses, don't work. And so we have to close the course to pick up those balls by hand by the staff. And so I believe we are closed part of this weekend because it was raining. We're probably closed tomorrow because it's raining. So as a result, it's inefficient. Our amenities also lag behind other comparable muni courses, and it's inconsistent with what we expect of Boundary Oak and frankly Walnut Creek. And so that's kind of the background as to why we're doing this. It's 55 years old, much like the pool at Heather Farm. We continue to maintain it and keep it in a fairly workable condition, but it's in need of significant investment. What's the potential? Better quality experience for the customers, more modern amenities, reduced impact on the environment, and a stronger financial return, which I'll talk about here. Right now, golf is a good business to be in, and it has been since the pandemic. It was one of the few things that the public could do 2020, 2021. And so our numbers, this is just the driving range alone, our numbers were very strong, even compared to budget. And so we're at about $350,000 to $400,000 budget, more than that in the actual, so over $400,000. That said, we believe we can do better with better amenities, better service, better experience. Closer to $650,000 a year is what we're estimating. So that's beginning in 25. The 24 period, of course, we'd potentially, with this project, be under construction. So what have we done to help identify opportunities to improve? In 2021, the council approved funding from the Enterprise Fund for a design consultant to help us deliver construction documents and design and cost estimates for what a new driving range could look like. We retained in 2022 a firm called the Nichols Group who did that work for us. And their design work includes improvements to the range, improvements to the tees, better ADA access, drainage improvements, better landscaping, a small plaza for people to gather, upgrades to utility, and a top tracer system, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is all done by the Nichols Group. I also want to thank our Public Works engineering friends, Alex Wong, who led this effort from the Public Works side. So thank you, Alex, and Heather, for your support. So top tracer technology, what is that? You may be familiar with Top Golf. This isn't Top Golf, but it's a whole lot better than we have today. So these are images of what you might see in a new facility at Boundary Oak. So a top tracer system is something that exists in many other driving ranges. See those monitors there on the side? They are installed at the hitting stations, which allow a golfer to track the distance, track the height, track your ball speed, which are very important to experienced golfers. But for those who are less experienced, there are also interactive activities. You can do long drives, you can do close to the pin, you can do points games with your friends and your family. And then another fun thing is you can play virtual golf on Pebble Beach or St. Andrews through this system. So it's pretty cool. So we're looking forward to that opportunity as part of this project, which will then lead to more people hopefully coming to the course and spending a little more time there. What's the cost? Those improvements don't come necessarily cheap, but we think this is a good investment to make in this project. The construction, of course, is the largest number, about $3.7 million. The rest are soft costs here. So the total, if this were funded through an internal loan, is about $4.7 million. If this were funded externally, and I'll talk about this, it would be another $184,000 roughly with financing charges. So that's the number that we're looking to figure out how we're going to pay for. What are the parameters that we're looking at? So potentially we're looking at, and this is up to the council, but we're looking at between a 15 and a 20-year payback period, a loan period for this. And we believe between staff and Corsco, and we're happy to talk about this in greater detail, that the enterprise fund has sufficient capacity as a whole to cover the debt service for each of those different payback periods, 15 years or 20 years, while continuing to generate revenue to offset our other expenses. So that's what we're looking at here as far as the parameters. There are two options that are in your staff report. One is through an external funding vehicle, and the other is internal. So number one is external, and the second, which is recommended, is an internal loan from the general fund to the enterprise fund. But I'll start with the external. So again, without going into too much detail, this is essentially a bond that we would be funding through an external public financing process. The city has, through the enterprise fund, retained a investment and financial management firm, Wolf Hansen, who we have worked with before back in 2015 when we remodeled the clubhouse at a 15-year term for 2.32%, and we're still paying consistently those loan payments. Other steps would include a bond and disclosure council, all the legal documents, all the official statements, what would be the collateral, a rating call, and financing. So that would all involve additional work of the council. Our estimates from our management firm are anywhere between a 3.3 and a 3.8% interest rate, depending on the term. There's more detail to be provided on that if you'd like, but those are the highlights of what an external bond would look like. Internally, a loan from the general fund to the enterprise fund is recommended both by staff and by the finance committee, as I said earlier. Just a bit of history, the general fund loaned the enterprise funds about $450,000 back in 2015 to refinance an existing bond from 1997. That has been fully repaid over the course of 10 years, 2%. That was the last payment was made just in December. So what's being recommended here is that $4.721 million loan here that's been recommended. This does require action from the council to set the rate and the term. The recommended rates by staff, by your finance committee, and by the treasurer independently is at 2.75%, which balances the current market rates with our historical investment return. And again, the other recommendation on the term is for 15 years. I'm not going to read through all these. The pros and the cons on the next page are what are shown here. This is in your report. Essentially, the pros of an internal loan are that you can have a lower than market interest rate, which is what's being recommended here. It moves a lot quicker than an external process would work, would not require collateral to be put up. It's most flexible in terms of the term, the rate, the prepayment, and potentially restructuring. On the flip side, the pros of an external loan would be it is a cost-effective option, would not impact the general fund. General fund would retain the maximum liquidity, and it potentially would increase the credit market visibility as the city's looking to potentially do other loan or bonds in the market. And then the inverse of these are the cons, right? So there's opportunity cost for the general fund if this were an internal loan. It may impact, it certainly would impact the liquidity as we put some of the money that's been identified at year end into this project. But on the other side, there are cons for the bond financing. Administratively, it would be somewhat a burden on staff, it would take a fair amount of time, and it would cost more. That's $184,000 that I mentioned earlier. And so what happens next? We're going to the Pros Commission in February to talk about the design. January, February, maybe into March, to the environmental process that will come back to the council, probably sometime in March. The financing process would start February, March, go out to bid the spring, award the contract in the spring. Construction would start in the spring and summer, and then hopefully by fall, November perhaps, we'd reopen. So a period of 4 to 6 months we'd be closed to do the construction. So that's the next steps in the process. Again, the recommended action is the resolution for those 2 items. I'll come back to this in a second, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin. And as somebody who uses the driving range, I am very appreciative of this. My question is, 6 months without people being able to take a stroke before getting onto a golf course, is there any way that another area, even a driving range net, something can be put up to help golfers in the meantime? Obviously, it would be not a full driving range, but something to help golfers.
Good question. I hadn't thought about that. I might ask my Courseco and Boundary Oak friends to come up here and answer that and see if they've done anything similar at other courses. Tom Bugbee is the Chief Operating Officer of Courseco. Tom will perhaps be able to answer that question. And if the answer is, we've never done that before, maybe that's your answer.
Okay.
Hi, Tom Bugbee. I'm the COO for Courseco. We have done similar things during projects, so there are several options that we can look at there. And you're right, it's not a great practice area, but hit a couple balls, get a little loose. So we can definitely examine those, and they're pretty cost effective too.
That's great, yeah, because the last thing I want to do is 7 in the morning, get out there. My very first swing of the day is on the first tee. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Understood.
Councilmember Silva?
Thank you very much for the report and the work on this. This has been a long time coming. This is just the last of a series of improvements over the last 15 years, I think. And thank you for your work on this. When I look at first of all, I support this. So my questions are really, they're not going to sound supportive because I'm going to ask about the financing alternatives that were considered. But one of the things I noticed when you look at the driving ranged revenues that are projected, that the revenues really don't cover the annual cost of this debt service.
Right.
So is there did by chance, and I asked you this in writing, so can you roughly tell us what the revenues and expenses are for the golf course operations, not the food and beverage?
I'll talk about it generally, and I'll have Tom speak to this in a little bit more specific. So we have run pro formas, which is a projection of what the likely outcome would be, both in terms of expenses and revenue for the entire enterprise fund, which is golf course, which is driving range, but also the clubhouse. Mm-hmm. So the enterprise fund right now has about $6 million in the total capacity. And so the numbers that we've run have shown that that enterprise fund as a whole can absorb that additional debt that we think here on both of those options, while continuing to fund the operations, fund the reserve, and have a little bit set aside to handle with emergencies. So I'll let Tom talk a little bit more specifics if you'd like some numbers with that, or if you want me just to leave it at that, I can do that too.
You can leave it at that, but it would have been, hopefully we can take a look at that because we did the budget in June and it's in the budget documents that we got over the holidays, I think.
So happy to talk about the numbers if you'd like. Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about pro forma numbers, like post-opening, right, of the new driving range. And roughly, we're talking about 6.2 million in revenue is what we expect total for the facility. Of that, approximately 2 million would be food and beverage, and 4.2 million would be total golf operations, which would include the driving range, green fees, merchandise, basically everything non-food and beverage. Total operating expenses would come in right around 4.3 million. Of that, 1.2 million is food and beverage. So the remaining 3.2 is golf operations. And so total before all debt services, it would produce a little over $1.1 million in what we call operating income. There is some city overhead that's not included in that. These are kind of just the operational side of the numbers, but plenty of cash flow to support the debt service.
And are the monies we set aside for capital improvements and the reserves included in the operating expense above the line or below the line?
Those come below the line.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. This is helpful. So a couple of questions about what was considered.
Sure.
Well, first of all, what is the outstanding balance on the loan that we took out in 2015 to improve the clubhouse, and what's the debt service on that?
I'm going to give you a round number. It's about 1.5 million remaining. And the term is still about 4.5 years until it gets cleared completely, and that's at that 2.32%.
So the annual payment on that is?
Give me a second.
At about
It is,
maybe
we're paying about $330,000 annually. We pay it twice a year.
Okay. So this will more than double our debt service.
Likely, yes.
Did we consider consolidating it? And you gave me an answer, so since it was such a lovely answer, I think you should give it to all of us.
Well, I didn't. It wasn't just me. It was my finance friends as well. It was considered. We talked to our finance consultant, and what they had indicated was you could do it. It would extend that 1.5 million over a longer period now, rather than paying it off sooner, at a higher rate. It's also held by a private institution, and they would have to agree to fold it into whatever we do differently.
Another question is, you can reduce the amount of interest you pay if you do a lending term that is faster. Did we look at maybe 12 years?
We did. We looked at 12 years. Well, we looked at 10 years. Yes, you would reduce the interest payment. You would increase your principal. And as we currently have that existing debt that runs through 2028, it was felt by staff and our advisor that loading more debt into that shorter amount of time isn't advisable from a cash flow perspective. So we did look at that. That's just not recommended.
Ergo, my question that Mr. Buckley answered. My last question was one I didn't think of until I saw the photos. Is there an inherent challenge with maintaining the driving range since it's an uphill slope?
Gravity
I was
always
looking at the puddling of the water.
right,
It looked
right.
like it was
And
good for ducks.
That's all, yeah, of course, or geese. That's always a challenge, and I might have Tom answer that, because this is not the only course that's on a slope, so I'll have him speak to how that is managed.
And does the new design, and then does the proposed new design help to address that?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, right? Gravity is working against us, not to mention the age of the drainage that's out there. I will say, having been a part of, so we operate 44 golf courses through the western United States. Having been a part of a lot of driving range projects, one of the things that increased the overall price of this is addressing the fact that it's on a slope and making sure we don't run into these future problems. So that's the good news from this project, and the work that's gone into the design is that's been addressed. The bad news is we're gonna have to pay a little more for it, but the net result's gonna be very positive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to ask my questions.
Anybody else? Like,
And we got a couple questions and comment on this in writing ahead of time, and I know we talked about a lot of these at the Finance Committee, so I was going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about it. So the concern that the author had was, is Measure O involved in this? Right. And the answer to that is?
No, there are no Measure O funds
Yeah.
As part of the enterprise fund or specifically this project.
And then if we elect tonight to go with financing out of the city's general fund to the enterprise fund. And then we go out for a subsequent bond issue to help fund Heather Farm. Is there a possibility to roll this funding into that and increase the total bond that we're going out for?
There is that possibility. I might have the city manager or the admin services director answer that. That's my understanding, though.
Yeah.
That's correct. That is a possibility if we wanted to revisit that in a year or so.
Yeah. And by setting the interest rate as proposed by the treasurer at 2.75, my understanding is that rate was being set so if the city had put that money from the general fund into its existing reserve and was earning interest on it, that 2.75 would basically be roughly equivalent to what we would get just putting in our reserve so that there is no impact on the city's general fund from this loan other than potentially increasing our ability to get good bond financing in the future.
Right. There's no expectation this would be an interest-free loan that would be significantly impactful to the general fund, the opportunity cost. So yes, that's the intent, is that there is a return so that the general fund is more or less made whole at the end of the term.
Yeah, the general fund is whole, Measure O is not involved.
Right.
And we do have flexibility that we wouldn't have if we went out to the bigger bond market. If we did that now and we did subsequent bonding for the pool, we wouldn't have the option to pull this funding into that because the same situation we're in with the financing for the food and beverage.
Right. Right. It would just be much more complex to do that.
Yeah, you'd have to make it a callable bond and all that stuff. So, okay, all right. Other than that, thank you for presenting it to finance and here tonight.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I actually got to go to a Top Golf place in Evans, well, it was Augusta, Georgia, but it was in the pouring rain, and it was also with a tornado advisory. So it was pretty empty. So I don't know that I get the real feeling of what a Top Golf station is, but it was fun. This is not a question. I'm getting to the question. It was fun to watch the TVs and see where your ball is really going. Does the actual course close during rain ever?
The course itself or
yeah.
just the range? The range
Yes.
does. We close if it's severe lightning, we will, but generally golfers, if you've seen Caddyshack, they like to play in the rain.
Right. They
Yeah.
got their umbrella. Okay. How many stations? Will it increase the capacity in order to get your numbers?
Yeah, we're roughly about the same number of stations. The revenue we expect to increase because people will get more people playing, volume. 2, people will stay longer, get more balls, and the fees might go up a little bit too as we look toward the future.
Is there any chance, because Top Golf was really fun, is there any chance that people would want to do Top Golf and the course will suffer in terms of their revenue?
Meaning the driving range and the top tracer system that we put in there? You think people do
Yeah,
that
no,
instead?
yeah. People just really enjoy that way more than going out and actually having to figure out where the ball landed.
Yeah. Tom will answer that.
Sure. So that was a big worry. This segment of golf it's called entertainment golf, and it was a big worry of the industry probably 10 years ago when it really started becoming mainstream. And we've actually found the opposite. We're creating new golfers through this entertainment. We're getting people out there that were maybe intimidated or weren't inclined to pick up golf, and now all of a sudden there's a golf club in their hand. And so our instruction programs are increasing, and participation on the courses are actually increasing as well. So we expect that there could be some side benefits that aren't even in these numbers as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And the time to convert, as I remember from the original presentation, was about 6 months to get it running.
Yeah.
And nothing ever goes that well, so we should have it by Christmas?
We're targeting November of this year is when we will reopen. We think 4 to 6 months is about the construction time, depending on all those variables. But yeah, the growing season is fairly limited, so our window is we need to get started by the spring or early summer at the latest.
All right. Thank you. I don't have any high intellectual questions, sorry. I think right now it's time for public comment, yes. Is there any public comment available?
Bob Kruger, Walnut Creek resident, 61 years, live a mile from Boundary Oaks Golf Course. There hasn't been much negative comments towards this proposal, more around financing, but I will say that I live a mile from the course. I will travel to Concord sometimes to use their facility because Boundary's facility is very substandard for, I think, the city of Walnut Creek. It is a big investment, but I will say that while I would agree that range revenues will definitely increase, courses like Hagen Oaks and Sacramento put in this technology. They actually have food trucks, they have music and bands out there at times now. It's been very successful. And I think given the investment in the clubhouse and the tap room, there is also some untapped revenue for people sticking around, going to the range and enjoying the experience. I think they will see some ancillary revenue coming in from the tap house, and overall I think the restaurant operations at the course. People at driving range, some enjoy having a few beverages, hanging out. At Diablo Creek Golf Course in Concord, they have a restaurant bar that's right by the driving range, so people tend to linger, spend more money at the facilities. So I think it's going to be good for the overall customer experience, and Boundary does get about plus or minus, 70,000 rounds a year out there. So that's a lot of people using the facility. So I think this will uplift it to, I think, represent the quality of what Walnut Creek residents should expect from a public facility that's been there since 1969. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see a long line, or any line for that matter. I'm looking. I'm not seeing. I'm seeing heads go like this. All right, I'm going to bring it back to council. Are there any additional questions or comments?
Not questions, just comments. Really appreciate that comment actually by Bob, was it, from the public? Obviously, you know your golf. First of all, certainly makes sense to keep money in the house. I think that's a no-brainer in this instance. The driving range absolutely needs it's more than a facelift. We need some plastic surgery reconstruction on this, so I'm really glad to see this. And in terms of becoming a city entertainment center, you mentioned Topgolf. Just my own anecdote is my son's, well, I guess fiance now that I think, wow, I've been saying girlfriend for 4 years, fiance now. She has never golfed in her life, and she suggested twice now while I've been there in the house to my son, oh, let's go play Topgolf. And they went down to San Jose, and another time they went to Roseville. So the fact that we're now local, I think we're going to see so many more people that normally wouldn't be on the golf course. You're probably going to be here in a couple of years asking us to put up some kind of a food service station or some kind of ability to be able to have people serve food from the tap house. So I think this is going to be phenomenally successful. I do think it will actually add more golfers, and I'm looking to have the Top Golf Light in Walnut Creek.
So thank you all for this. And as the other member of the Finance Committee, we took this issue and pulled it apart 6 different ways till Sunday. It is a good win-win situation. We have the money to loan ourselves. We can save on interest rates. We can save on bond financing costs up front. We can save when it comes time to make the decision about the bigger bond issue, and it really protects that commitment we made to our voters. It's not Measure O, it is general fund. We're keeping those separate, and we're finding a way to increase the pie so that we are even better able to move forward with Heather Farm when we're ready to do this. So I'm prepared to support it.
Matt, would you?
No, I was a little slow on the draw, but I did have a few questions. I'm also supportive of the project. Sorry, Kevin. On more goes to the driving range. So what do we anticipate the estimated life of the new range will be?
You mean before we have to come back here again and ask the same questions? So we're thinking 30 years or so. Just given what was described about the slope, it might last longer if it were flat, but there are challenges with nature. But yeah, 30 years is a good investment.
And the one what we have now is original, back to 1969,
Yep.
essentially, with some lipstick on it.
Right.
Not reconstructive surgery. You made an allusion to the cost, and if you could maybe just refresh my memory. My understanding is and I'm not a golfer, so it's about $8 to $10. You purchase a bucket of balls, and that gives you access to the driving range. Does the council set those rates so that there were to be any increase, that would be something we would have to approve?
The council establishes ranges within which staff and our operator establish the fee rate. We're happy to have those conversations when we bring this to you. When we reopen the facility, we'll have a range. We'll talk what the current fee is and what the proposed fee is, so you'll have a chance to see that. But council doesn't typically set the specific fees.
But it would extend to something like the driving range?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. There was a reference in the staff report to, there's a little bit of budget creep, and I know we've already accounted for it in our capital budget. How confident are we in our $4.7 million figure?
Yeah, so when the council approved the capital budgets for the current fiscal year at $4 million, we were still working with our consultant to establish what we thought the estimated construction cost would be. It has gone up a little bit. At the same time, we've reduced other amenities that we thought we were going to add to that. Somebody talked about a food station, or we're pulling that out, doing other things. So how confident are we? As confident as, this is going to sound like a dodge, but as confident as we can be at this point for a project we haven't done here ever, but working with Corsco and working with our designer, these are the numbers that they feel confident in. Working with Public Works and our other project manager, this is where we think we're going to end up, and we'll know when we bid it out. And obviously, we can make some adjustments to the contract such that if we're looking at keeping at this target, the 4.7, we will do that. That's our goal. That's the money that you're providing to us, so we will stick within that target.
So is it fair to say we have pretty detailed design drawings that we've gotten estimates from professionals on? We don't have bids.
Correct. We have, sorry, to your question, yes, we have detailed design drawings. We're almost at 100% there, having it looked at both by our designer and our project manager, who's external to this, has looked at those figures. And so we're probably 95% confident in them at this point, and we'll go out to bid soon.
One of the other questions I had was about kind of food services, and so that was that was to keep the budget contained.
Yeah.
What would that, I'm just curious, kind of, if we were to add that on later, kind of what the costs of that are? Is there a way to do that with food trucks, or kind of a more economical route?
I keep interrupting you. There are options for us, both in terms of the existing service, the tap house. We could have a more direct line from the tap house, which is not that far away, but people may not see it or know it's there, and have that service brought up to the range, or food trucks could be part of this experience that we bring into the course at certain times. We're also putting in utilities such that if we do decide to put in a food service, and it would be fairly casual food service, but we could do that in the future. So those options do exist.
Those were all my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Since you're already on the mic, do you want to make any comments, or?
I think that this improvement appears long overdue. I think that it's interesting to see the numbers, just how successful the golf course has been, but the driving range as well, and how it's increased revenues. I've talked to golfer friends and neighbors who value this resource and want to see it continued. So I think this means of doing the internal loan, we do have these one-time funds, that it makes sense to do this. I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Darling's comment that we wouldn't be in a worse position than if we had invested these funds, that we would be in a same or similar position. So with that, I'm prepared to support the proposal.
Okay. Councilmember Wilk.
Well, if everybody's going to sit here and smile and nod, I'll make a motion to approve.
And I will second that, even though I still doubt that a driving range will ever really allow me to swing a golf club correctly, but I'm going to keep trying, so I will second.
Okay, we didn't get a comment from Councilmember Silva.
I would just want to thank staff and Corsco staff, as well as the members of the public who participate and give feedback frequently on this. I think this is long overdue, as one of my colleagues said, and I think it is for a very good golf course that is well respected in the region. Many of our local golf courses are struggling And so I'm glad we're able to do this. I actually think the technology solution being put in could actually allow us to have extended evening hours, even on a Friday or Saturday night. When you can't get out on a dark golf course in the middle of the night, probably not a good idea, but you could go up and play there. And I think the borrowing from ourselves or lending from the general fund to ourselves, it's what we used 12 years ago when we needed to pay down our pension liability obligation, and it was successful then, and this should be successful now. Thank you.
I have heard from more than a few people that Boundary Oak is probably the best public golf course in Northern California. It's that highly respected, and the driving range was adequate. I'm not a good enough striker to even get past halfway up the hill. So it didn't make a lot of difference to me, but there were a lot of people that will be able to improve their skills and enjoy it even better. Okay, we even have one here. So I am excited about this. It's been threatened for years, and it's finally the threat's finally going to come through. So I'm going to support it too. I have a motion and a second. I only need a roll call.
Councilmember Wilk.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Darling.
Aye.
Councilmember Francois.
Aye.
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
Mayor Haskew.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Looks like it's a good deal. All right, that being the end of our items and the agenda, we are calling this meeting closed.